The manhwa begins with the protagonist working alone in an office, visibly exhausted and with a worn-out face due to not having taken a break. He gasps for breath and falls to the ground. He manages to get back up, saying that he can't lose the battle against overtime hours. He still can't finish his shift, but he doesn't complete his sentence as he falls exhausted to the ground again and remains there until he loses consciousness. The protagonist explains that he worked too many overtime hours and died from overwork, but now he's alive again. We see him standing in front of the grave of a man named Father Chen, where he confirms that indeed he crossed over to another world. He has reincarnated as a hunter named Chen Fei, whose father died after being attacked by an animal while hunting. This saddened his son greatly, who decided to follow him to the afterlife. It was then that the protagonist obtained his body. He laments all the savings he left behind in his previous life but decides not to complain and sees it as another chance to live. He believes that he must live better now when suddenly a hologram appears behind him. The hologram says that the salty fish ascension system has been activated. The protagonist is initially scared, but then he thinks that it might be a scenario for him. A scenario in which he dominates the world with the powers of the system and obtains a harem. Just like in the comics he reads, where according to the plot, he is about to reach the pinnacle of the game. He opens his arms to accept the power, but the system becomes locked because it detects that the protagonist is exerting too much effort. This angers him, and he demands an explanation, but the system only tells him to demonstrate his salty power, and that the system will unlock in his next life. This infuriates the protagonist even more, as he doesn't understand and insults the system. But the system shoots a beam at him and tells him that he is forbidden to do that and to read the user manual if he has any doubts. He asks if he will still be himself in the next life, and the system tells him yes, as it has already archived his soul. At this point, the protagonist realizes that dying naturally would take too much time, so he asks if he can stop breathing to expedite it. But the system informs him that if he ends his life voluntarily, the system will not unlock. Therefore, he concludes that he has to make death come to him. He says that he will live a good salty life, but the system tells him no because a salty fish doesn't work hard, so he decides to live without desiring anything, and the system wishes him luck on his journey before disappearing. At this point, the protagonist says that Chen Fei should be the one to be salty, not him. Therefore, with the aim of quickly entering the next life, he will use external forces according to the rules to die. In a scene change, we are transported to the headquarters of the haunted soul demon sect, where the followers worship the sect saint named Shui Qingmei. She obtained a demonic relic called the Pearl of Confusion, claiming that her group will become a great sect because of it, and the followers praise her for it. But then a hostile aura strikes her and takes away the pearl. She looks up and sees that it's a girl who is holding the pearl in her hand. This angers Shui, so she orders her followers to chase after her, and they all launch an attack. Back with the protagonist, we see him resting at home while contemplating ways to accidentally die. His stomach growls with hunger, and he concludes that he has to go hunting to eat. And he realizes that the forest might be full of deadly dangers, so he gets up excitedly and runs to find them. Later on, the protagonist finds himself in the middle of the forest, with a boar about to charge at him. He thinks that with that, he will be immediately reborn. But when the animal's fangs are right in front of his face, his hands move on their own and stop them. Then he lifts the boar and slams it onto the ground, rendering it incapacitated. The protagonist curses that Chen Fei was such a powerful hunter and passed on his abilities to him. He gets annoyed at the possibility of having to die from natural causes in 40 years, so he asks for a stone to fall from the sky and kill him. Suddenly, a fireball falls on his house, surprising the boy. He tells it that if a rock was going to fall, it should have hit him instead of the house. The protagonist enters the premises and wonders what the hell happened. Upon seeing the wreckage, he starts picking up the debris, saying that it was very unlucky and wonders where he will live in the future. Then he removes a board and realizes that it's the girl who stole the Pearl of Confusion. The protagonist approaches the body carefully, thinking that she fell from the sky along with a large sword. So, she could be an immortal cultivator, quite beautiful, but he's not sure if she's alive or dead. He approaches and puts his ear on her chest to feel the heartbeat, but he feels nothing, and since she is so young, he says it's a pity. Suddenly, she gets up and stares at him. This frightens the protagonist, and he moves away, telling her not to misunderstand and that he just wanted to make sure she was alive. But she simply tells him it hurts, which confuses him, and a small stone falls on his head. Both of them leave the house, and the protagonist tells her that he will allow her to stay to heal her wounds. He prepares to go get medicinal herbs, but the girl tells him it's not necessary. The protagonist turns around, asking what she means, and what he sees leaves him speechless. Suddenly, he nervously asks her what she's doing, and we see that she is naked. The girl then summons a couple of medicinal bottles but says she is very weak, so she asks the protagonist if she can bother him to apply the medicine for her. The protagonist's nose starts bleeding intensely and he asks her if she's sure about it. But shamelessly, she turns her back to him and says that a cultivator is not someone who worries about small details like that. To which the protagonist responds that she's not being careless but bold, and she thanks him for the compliment. Nervously, the protagonist applies the medicine to his hand and prepares to apply it. He carefully observes the girl's back, which seems to have a quite severe injury, so he delicately applies the medicine to her. After a few moments, he sees that the injury starts to fade until it almost completely heals. He thinks that the medicine is too effective and wonders if it's an immortal cultivation treasure. He asks the girl about the wounds, but while she dresses again, she tells him that it's a long story. And she says that her name is Zhao Zuli, a cultivator from the Sword Sect, and she thanks him for his help. This surprises the protagonist, who says his name is Yula and he is a hunter. He asks her why she fell from the sky. She tells him that a few days ago, she learned that the Haunted Soul Sect was preparing a major plan. In order to prevent the loss of innocent lives, she attacked the demons. However, she was outnumbered and they ended up chasing her. That's how she ended up in that place and damaged his house, but she tells him not to worry about it. She will compensate him when they return to the Sword Sect. The protagonist thinks that Zhao is a fearless person for confronting an entire sect on her own, but he finds it impressive that she is still alive, so he asks her about her plans now. She tells him that the demonic sect doesn't rest when their treasures are stolen, so she will return to her sect to inform them about this. But then a strong coughing fit hits her, forcing her to lean against a tree and spit out blood, which worries the protagonist. He tells her that she is too badly injured to face any more danger on the road. Zhao agrees, so she asks him if he can accompany her back to the Sword Sect, and she would be very grateful if he agrees. The protagonist hesitates for a moment, which makes Zhao enthusiastically tell him to forget it because it's too dangerous. But then the protagonist asks how far the Sword Sect is, and she says it will take them half a month to get there. He says that the road must be filled with assassins, and it's so dangerous that there should be a 90% chance of dying. So he asks the system if dying from an assassin while escorting the girl goes against the rules. And the system tells him that dying in a sudden accident while helping others is not a violation of the regulations. Zhao interrupts his thoughts, saying that she is being harsh by asking a mortal to accompany her, and she won't force him if he doesn't agree. But with valor, he promises that she wasn't harsh and says that he will accompany her in her fight against the demons since she has risked her life for the sake of the world. She realizes he is lying, but she doesn't sense any malicious intent from him, so she ignores that fact. And after telling him that she is sure, Zhao accepts that he will travel with her. Before they set off, the protagonist promises Chen's father that he will die as soon as possible so that his son can rest in peace, and they embark on the journey. In a scene change, we see Shui, who insults her followers and curses Zhao for ruining her sect's 50-year plan. Then she calls upon a master of the organization named Zhao Kuani, ordering him to kill the immortal and retrieve the Pearl of Confusion. He accepts the task, and Shui lends him a demonic treasure to aid him in his mission. With the promise of a reward if he succeeds, the assassin thanks her deeply. Meanwhile, the saint says that the girl Zhao is not only gravely injured but also affected by a locating incense, so she cannot escape. In a scene change, we see the protagonist sleeping by the fire in the middle of the night. Suddenly, Zhao seems to approach and slips her hand inside the protagonist's clothes to rub his skin, which wakes him up. He realizes that it's the blushing girl who is placing herself on top of him. Nervously, the protagonist wonders what kind of +18 plot this is, where everything is unfolding so quickly, and it's so exciting that it cannot be shown to the readers. Then Zhao gets closer and whispers in his ear that they're here, which confuses the protagonist. She tells him that the demonic sect is approaching. The protagonist immediately gets up and asks where they are and if there are many of them. But she tells him to lower his voice and that the assassin was very cautious and didn't get close. Instead, he cast a spell called Go to the Witch's Mountain. It unleashes fog in the area, and anyone in it will be awakened by 7 emotions and 6 desires. The protagonist confirms that there is a slight pink mist nearby, so he says that she should have told him because he has seen countless movies. But she tells him that it only works on women, and suddenly she coughs forcefully again, but says she can still hold on. Then the protagonist helps her up and asks her what they should do now. Zhao explains that at that moment, there are only 2 ways to break the spell. One is with a hidden card, but it's too dangerous because if she uses it, her enemy will die, but the protagonist will die with him. This pleases him, as he thinks he wants to use it. but she tells him that she knows he won't agree and she won't let her benefactor die innocently. So the second option is to find out where the enemy is so that she can kill him with her sword. She warns him that it seems like he used some device to conceal his movements, and her divine sense is too weak to find him. But since he grew up in the forest, he should be able to track his trail. The protagonist says he will do it while thinking that his opportunity to die has finally arrived. There we see the assassin hidden among the trees behind them, who says that the cloak not only prevents a cultivator's divine sense, but also protects him from the 5 senses of others, so they won't even be able to sense him if they touch him, and he revels in all that he can gain by killing Zhao. But suddenly he sees that the protagonist is searching for him, but he says it's impossible for him to find him, because he reversed the airflow to make him think he's in the south when he's actually in the north. Then suddenly he sees an arrow coming straight towards his face. The assassin manages to react in time, deflecting the arrow and breaking it in two. The protagonist remarks that his plan to die has failed, while the assassin says that his position is exposed. The protagonist wonders why he shot the arrow at him. Then we see a minute earlier, where the protagonist realizes that the spell blows from the south, so he is certain it will fail if he shoots to the north. He plans to shoot outside of Zhao's protection, so when she goes to retrieve the arrow, the assassin can easily kill him. We return to the present, and the protagonist cries because his well-thought-out plan failed, and he won't have another chance as Zhao will kill him. But then the assassin escapes in front of him. The protagonist asks Zhao why she didn't move, and she, embarrassed, responds that her reaction is still slow due to her injuries. She also didn't expect him to find the assassin so quickly, so she takes his hand and promises him that she will seize the opportunity to finish him off if she finds him again. The protagonist says he will do the same and takes out another arrow, stating that this time he won't miss the assassin, who thinks the same. The assassin jumps between the trees and returns to the same position as before, thinking that the protagonist wouldn't expect it. But we see the protagonist wondering where he should shoot and concludes that the assassin wouldn't be foolish enough to return to the same spot. So he shoots the arrow and hits him, which infuriates both of them, and the assassin manages to escape again. The protagonist looks at Zhao and asks her if she didn't have time again, to which she responds that he's too fast, and she gets tired. She draws her sword to be ready this time. However, this causes her to bleed due to her injuries, and she says there will be no more mistakes. If she finds him, she will kill him this time. The protagonist assures her that it's okay while mentally telling the assassin not to let him shoot again. And the assassin thinks that Zhao's medicine is about to take effect, so it's his last chance. Both hesitate on where to shoot and where to hide respectively, thinking about what the other would do, until they come up with the perfect spot, and the assassin attacks from above, while the protagonist aims there as well. The assassin says that by the time he realized the arrow, it was already in front of him and too late to dodge it. So he thinks that the protagonist saw it and pretended not to, and then he is hit by the arrow. The protagonist is annoyed that the assassin always manages to catch it, but then he thinks that maybe the assassin is also seeking death like him. Then Zhao appears and shouts at the assassin to suffer death. He generates a barrier around himself to protect himself, but although he blocks the initial impact, it's not enough. The cultivator's sword pierces through the barrier and strikes him directly. The body of the assassin falls defeated in front of the protagonist, who approaches him, calling him brother, and asks why he keeps hitting his arrows, and if he deliberately seeks death. This angers the man so much that he starts spitting blood through his bandages. This disturbs the protagonist, who tells him that he's bleeding from all 7 orifices and asks what happened to him. Then he grabs him by the neck and shakes him, telling him to wake up because he wants to ask him how to find death as well. That's when he realizes that Zhao is standing next to him, so he asks the girl if she's okay and if it's too early to put away their weapons. But she says yes, as the demonic sect is only testing them for now. So the next step will probably be preparing the masters to ambush them on the way. The protagonist says there are too many of them, and they could be surrounded and forced to return to the sword sect. So he asks how they know which path they will take. That's when Zhao reveals something she hadn't told him before and says that with her injury, if she doesn't reach the sword sect in half a month, she will definitely die. So there are only 3 indispensable routes to return, and the haunted soul sect also knows this, so they have no way of avoiding them. She worries because she says the path ahead is difficult, and she won't blame him if he regrets accompanying her and wants to leave. But the protagonist confidently asks what she's talking about and reminds her that he promised to send her back to the sword sect. So he will accompany her to the end, and there's no way he will abandon her halfway. While he thinks to himself not to worry because he won't leave until he has a violent death. That's when Zhao puts her hands on her head while thanking him, and suddenly she pulls the protagonist towards her chest, causing him to separate from her and tell her that it's very inappropriate. And she asks him to go away for a moment to eliminate the power of the medicine from her body. Back with Shu, she realizes that the assassin failed, but she says that the elders are still waiting for her, and she wonders if she will be able to win. We see that the pair arrives in a city, and the protagonist mentions that Zhao is not as foolish as she seems, because the demonic sect didn't actually send more men after them, and they arrived without problems at the first place they had to pass through, which is the city of Jinan. The protagonist asks why the city is a mandatory destination to return to the sword sect, and she explains that it's because the city guards the entrance to the country of Xinding, one of the subordinate countries where the sect is located. And since she is severely injured, she must enter Xinding from the city to reach the sect as soon as possible from the west. The protagonist understands and asks if the Haunted Soul sect won't dare to come after them since they are within the jurisdiction of the sword sect, while he mentally asks the assassins to attack them because his plan depends on them. Zhao explains that normally they wouldn't, but the demons are willing to do anything for their goals, and the next ambush will be deadly, which delights the protagonist. Night falls, and we see the protagonist waiting upside down while Zhao takes a bath, when suddenly she opens the curtain without getting dressed and says that the Haunted Soul sect has arrived. This surprises the protagonist, who falls to the ground and says it was very fast. Then they hear the voices of the elders, who tell Zhao that they will seek revenge and make her pay with blood. She summons her sword and names each of the elders to come out of hiding. They are the grandmother of the 5 poisons, the 10,000 pawns of the valley of the spiritual god, the faceless monk of the temple of the faceless, and Sun Weishi of the evil shadow faction. Then the windows open, and both of them turn to discover the elders in front of the door, who tell her that they harbor the desire for revenge for massacring their peaceful families in their hearts. But she mocks their words because each of their factions commits terrible acts against people, so no one in them is innocent. This angers the old woman, and they prepare to fight, but Zhao stops the protagonist with her towel, and he tells her that it's better for him to take her place because she's injured. However, the old woman tells her that if they fight in the middle of the city, many people could die, which Zhao doesn't want. So they offer her a deal, in which if she completes the test that the 4 of them have prepared for her, they promise not to attack her, and they will bind their souls to the contract so that if anyone breaks it, their souls will be destroyed. The old woman asks Zhao what she thinks, while thinking that they are no match for her under normal conditions. But if she signs the contract, her life will be in their hands. The protagonist wonders who would fall for that, as any fool can see that there is something wrong with the contract. But then Zhao says she will sign, and the protagonist approaches her to tell her to think clearly because it's clear that they have bad intentions. And she says she knows, but she can't let him or the people in the city die because of her. The old woman then unfolds the contract in front of her, and Zhao is about to sign when the protagonist stops her. And he says that the contents of the test and the restrictions are not written, so they could make Zhao do anything they want. And in anger, he strikes through the contract, asking them how dare they deceive people into signing a contract with so many loopholes. And he thinks that even if he seeks death, he can't let them deceive Zhao. The old woman tells him not to talk nonsense and starts fighting the protagonist, trying to convince Zhao to believe them. But she doesn't, and she says she will fight if they don't change the contract. The elders then retreat to discuss it and conclude that it's better to modify the contract because they can't defeat her in battle. So the protagonist determines the conditions of the challenge, which must be within the capabilities of the 4 of them. There must be a way to pass it without injuries, and if they pass the test, the elders must go to the far west where no one lives and never interfere again. While he thinks that not only does it help Zhao, but it also doesn't hinder his plan to find death. The old woman wonders how he figured out their plan but agrees because Zhao won't pass the test anyway, and the protagonist asks her to add his name to the contract. The old woman agrees, so she invokes the new document in front of them. Zhao tells the protagonist that he doesn't have to do it, but he asks her how he could consider himself her companion if he doesn't, while he thinks that he will do it because it's a deadly test. This moves Zhao, who is amazed that he is willing to fight by her side despite being a mere mortal, so she will protect him until death, and both of them sign the contract. The protagonist wants to take the test, and the old woman says that this one is for Zhao. But the protagonist says that he also signed and provokes the old woman to let him participate, which he manages to do, and she tells him that the test consists of drinking 3 out of her 9 poison cups, playing a game of chess, defending himself in combat, and surviving against a shadow beast. But just as he is about to choose, Zhao stops him and insists on taking the test herself. But the protagonist asks her not to ruin his chance to die. Then he remembers that the system might count it as an intentional suicide attempt. So he asks if dying in the test counts, and after calculating, the system tells him that it doesn't because it's a heroic act. So the only thing left is to convince Zhao. He then starts telling her that in the end, she only sees him as a useless mortal just like them, and that their time together meant nothing because she still treats him as someone inferior, which the elders enjoy. But then the protagonist starts acting cute to evoke secondhand embarrassment, which disgusts the elders and Zhao, who finally agrees to let him take the test. The protagonist then says he will start with the poison test because it is an immediate and efficient way to die. The old woman mixes the cups and tells him to choose 3 to drink and pass the level. Due to the contract, not all of them are poisonous, but he must find the poisonous ones. The protagonist thinks that he should choose any 3 cups because it is impossible to randomly pick 3 non-poisonous ones. But since he successfully hit all 3 arrows with the assassin, he should try to find the poison. However, the first 3 cups look like water and there is no visible difference. The protagonist takes the first glass and sniffs it, but there is no odor. So he smells the second glass when suddenly he feels his limbs going numb and falls to the ground, causing concern to Zhao. And he says that he's not well. The old woman mocks him because he can't even withstand a single inhalation, and that's not even one of her strongest poisons. So she suggests that he gives up. But he says it's great, while thinking that the stronger the poison, the better for dying. Before choosing, he decides to check the 3rd glass, but the smell of the previous one makes him tremble a lot, and he accidentally spills a drop on the table. And as it falls, it eats through the table like acid, so he says it must be that one and drinks it in one gulp. The protagonist waits for the poison to take effect, but nothing happens. The old woman admits that he has skill since he chose the poison that only corrodes wood and doesn't harm the human body. So she asks him who taught him about poisons. This frustrates the protagonist, who wonders what kind of poison that is, and it doesn't make sense that in the world of immortals, there are only things he doesn't want. The grandmother asks if he can't say anything out of fear that his master will get involved. But the protagonist tells her that she misunderstood him, and he has no master, nor did he learn the art of poisoning. So the old woman tells him to forget it and proceed with the 2nd glass of wine. The protagonist looks at the cups and thinks that in the first column, the old woman tricked him with what seemed to be poisoned wine. So with the 2nd column, he will choose the cup that appears the most harmless. But his conscience hits him and tells him to think it through. So the protagonist stops to analyze the situation, and now he says that it should be the opposite, and he should choose the one that seems more scandalous. So he places his hand on a glass with black liquid, but he also stops, thinking that the old woman could have put poison in the first glass that looks more normal. And then no, it's probably the 2nd glass, until finally, he bursts into despair for not knowing which glass is poisoned and asks for someone to help him. Then he starts touching the glasses to see the old woman's reaction. She frowns when he touches the black glass, so he grabs it and her reaction intensifies. So he understands that must be the glass without poison and the other 2 have it. He randomly chooses one and drinks it, but nothing happens to him. And the old woman says she didn't expect him to be so good with poison since he chose the only way to survive out of those 3 glasses. This makes the protagonist cry, wondering how that makes sense. And he complains to the old woman for frowning when there was no poison. And Zhao understands that the protagonist chose that test because he is very good with poison, and she encourages him to choose the last glass, to which he responds through tears that he will do his best. He thinks that it's a mistake to overthink, as well as having choices and choosing wrong. So he decides that he won't think, and he chooses the green one and drinks it. He says it's too sweet to be poisoned when suddenly he coughs up blood. And while the old woman laughs, she tells him that he's dead. Zhao asks what tricks he used, and the old woman tells her that the protagonist chose the first 2 columns correctly, but the 3rd column was certain death regardless of the glass because all the glasses had poisoned wine. And the only way to survive was to choose the glasses in the correct order to counteract the poison. But since he didn't, the protagonist only has 2 hours left to live. He then asks if he really drank poison because he feels super energetic and even wants to bounce. But she tells him it's just because he's remembering what he did during his life before dying. To which the protagonist responds that he feels relieved and thinks that finally, it's his time to die. This raises suspicion in the old woman, who wonders why he smiles so happily if he's poisoned. But she says it doesn't matter because they are after Zhao, and she tells the immortal that she still has 3 tests left, and there's no one left to help her. But then the protagonist steps in and says that he still has 2 hours to live, so the test is still his. And to continue, he chooses chess, while he thinks it will be just what he needs to ensure his death. Later on, we see him and the old man playing at a high speed, where the protagonist thinks he will die soon. His body starts to feel heavy, and he says goodbye to the readers. The old man apologizes to him, saying that he will win the game, but the protagonist tells him not yet and that he will show him what it means to be a chess king. He lifts a piece while saying it's the technique of the mixed elemental ray of 2 paths and 3 blocks, when suddenly, a strong headache makes him drop all the pieces. Zhao approaches worriedly and wonders if it's the poison, but the old woman says that the headache is from the chess game. Zhao asks them what trick they're using, but the old man tells her it's not a trick. Rather, the chessboard is a magical treasure from the Valley of the Spiritual God, called Unknowingly Kills You in 5 Moves, a name that embarrasses their companions. There, the old man explains that every time a player places a piece, their spirit loses 1 point. So if a mortal like the protagonist, who has no cultivation, plays, what is consumed is their cerebral power, kai, and blood. Therefore, the reason his head hurts is that he played too fast, and his kai and blood were depleted. So even without the poisoned wine, he will die from excessive exhaustion of kai and blood. Zhao asks the protagonist to play for him, but he asks her not to stop him and to let him use the last strength he has left, while he thinks that draining his kai and blood is the same as what happened in his previous life, and he is already familiar with it, so he challenges the old man and his power with conviction. It is mentioned that 15 minutes pass, and we see both players looking emaciated and moving with difficulty. The protagonist gasps, exhausted, as he takes a new chess piece and says it's a bit overwhelming. The old woman says he won't last much longer, so Zhao worriedly tells the protagonist to stop and not play anymore, but he says he's fine and can still hold on. Another 35 minutes pass, and the old man is so worn out that he asks the protagonist if he's really immortal. The protagonist is lying on the floor, but with his last bit of strength, he continues to move the chess piece, while telling him that he must show him the iron will of the workers, and he manages to make his move, so it's the old man's turn. But he collapses and admits defeat, so the protagonist says the worker has won, but then he coughs up more blood. Zhao rushes to him and asks how he's doing when suddenly the old woman looks distressed, and she says that the poison in the protagonist's body has been eliminated. The protagonist appears confused, and Zhao happily asks if it's really gone. The old woman reproaches the protagonist, saying she can't believe he saw through her tricks, and that he not only deceived them but also eliminated the poison, so she's really angry, and the protagonist falls into depression, thinking that the poison has been eliminated. The old man tells him not to dwell on it and asks what kind of tricks the boy used, and she explains that the protagonist knew in advance that their game wasn't chess but kai and blood, and that's why he deliberately chose the poison called meteorite of smoke and fire. Both the old man and the protagonist wonder what she means. There she explains that it's a secret poison from her sect with extraordinary mysteries, and after drinking it, the potential of the poisoned person is constantly stimulated, making their spirit 100 times better than before, until the vitality becomes so strong that the body can't handle it and bursts into flames. So the protagonist used the chessboard to compensate for the kai and blood that had been stimulated by the poison, until the power was depleted and the poison naturally alleviated, so the old man also lost because of this. It's a usage that not even the pioneers who created it could have imagined. And the protagonist wonders what she's talking about because he didn't even know which cup was poisoned. Sunwaishi tells the old woman that she's overthinking it because he couldn't have known about the test in advance and prepared a strategy with such little time, so he believes it's a coincidence. This pleases the protagonist as there are still people who understand him. But then the old woman asks why he was smiling so much after signing the contract, and why he felt so relieved after drinking the poison and vomiting blood. She realized that the protagonist was mocking her ignorance when he asked if what he was drinking was really poison, and the protagonist spits up blood again. The old woman reflects that the protagonist knows a lot about their sects, and Zhao called him Yula, so she thinks he is the son of Yu Shuihyuan, the ancestor of the 10,000 demons. But the protagonist doesn't even know who that is, and he sees Zhao getting nervous, so he tells her to stop making up things about him. And he says his father was not a cultivator but a common hunter. But the old woman seems to understand something else, which further annoys the protagonist. And she says that the ancestor was a hunter before becoming a cultivator, and disappeared 20 years ago, which happens to be the protagonist's age, so he must be his son. This leaves everyone speechless, but he insists that he is not and that his father died after being bitten by a wild animal, so he shouldn't have been very powerful. But the old woman understands something again, which makes the protagonist explode. And she explains that the ancestor confronted the master of the battling sky sect and was defeated. So he either died from his injuries or pretended to be mortal. This makes Zhao suspicious and she's about to draw her sword. So to prevent that, the protagonist tells her that he didn't inherit any abilities. But the old woman tells him that it takes 30 years to activate them, which even makes the protagonist doubt if he really reincarnated into who they say he is. But he remembers that Yu is his name, not the name of the person in that world. Then the old woman reproaches him for helping Zhao instead of them, and Zhao asks him why he does it. There, the protagonist evaluates his options and concludes that going along with that identity is the best course of action. So he responds that it depends on the heart to decide what is right or wrong, and he will be a man on the right path, so he will continue with the test as agreed. And he says he will do the next test to earn her trust. The monk tells him that he is worthy of being the ancestor's son, and along with Sun Weishi, they seem to have agreed on something. Suddenly, both of them throw themselves to the ground and call him young master. They say that the ancestor of the 1,000 demons once ruled over the sects of both worlds, and since he is their son, it makes him their master, so they willingly concede defeat. The old woman calls them traitors but says they are only traitors for not including them in their plan. The protagonist tells them that the test must continue, but they insist on surrendering. He starts shaking them, hoping they will let him die, while the elders wonder if they will be able to leave alive. Then the old woman understands something else and explains that the protagonist signed the contract as a cover-up to kill people and obtain treasures. And he added a condition for them to go far away so that they wouldn't know where he would bury them, which is why they call him a traitor. There, Zhao draws her sword and ends the conflict, telling them that they admitted defeat, so they must go to the far west and not return for 10 years. The elders immediately accept and leave, saying that they still admire Zhao's character. So the protagonist finally feels at ease. Zhao tells him that he is underestimating the demons or overestimating her because with her current strength, it is impossible for her to kill them. And the protagonist tells her to just go to sleep, but she has something to tell him and searches among her clothes. This makes the protagonist nervous, but she takes out the confusion pearl, and she tells him that it's because she stole it from the haunted soul sect, and they are after her. And it's dangerous because it confuses the mind and corrupts the heart, turning the possessor into someone deeply demonic. So it was dangerous to leave it with the sect. And she didn't tell him because she didn't think it was necessary, but things have changed. She tells him that she revealed her secret and is no longer hiding anything, so she asks the protagonist what he is hiding. He thinks about what to tell her, whether to reveal the truth about his reincarnation, but he considers that he can't say that. So he gives her his word that he will never harm her and will even go to battle for her. And he has a secret, but he is not free to reveal it, so he promises that it won't harm her. After a brief moment, she says that everyone has something to hide, and she believes him. This leaves the protagonist a little disappointed. Some time later, we see a carriage speeding along a road. Zhao and the protagonist are on board, while the latter thinks that he had high hopes for the 4 elders. But he didn't expect them to be 4 losers who would run away after losing, and the event made Zhao suspicious of him. She asks him how he's doing because she didn't expect him to react so badly. And we see that the protagonist is feeling dizzy and has to stick his head out of the carriage to vomit. She tells him to hold on a little longer because they're almost at the inn where they'll be safe. But hearing this doesn't make the protagonist happy. He wonders who wants to be safe when he wants to die. The pair finally arrives at the inn, but the place seems deserted. Zhao says that the inn is the only resting place on the road, which is usually very busy, but now it's quiet. So she fears that the demon sect is already there and has set up an ambush. But the protagonist has no hope and says that he would die faster by vomiting than waiting to be killed. Suddenly, bells ring, and Shui appears, telling Zhao that she finally arrived. The demon troops appear, and the protagonist wonders what's going on as they move in formation. Shui says that she can't believe the 4 old men were so unreliable as to let her arrive unscathed, and it really depends on her to kill people. Zhao asks her if she will really do it, so Shui asks if she's scared, and the protagonist wonders if Shui is good. The Holy Maiden jumps behind her troops and says that the 6 Desires soul blocking formation is ready, so she's going to kill Zhao there today. The demons launch their attack all at once, but the girl gets rid of them with just one sword movement, and she asks the Holy Maiden if she thinks she's worthy. But as she prepares to counterattack, the protagonist jumps forward, running, while asking in his mind to let him do it, and that his life is for her. The protagonist runs directly towards the Holy Maiden while crying and shouting that his life is for her, which scares her. She doesn't dodge his charge, so the protagonist easily sends her flying far away, so much so that even her troops are surprised by the distance she covered. The holy maiden crashes to the ground, and her troops rush to her aid, asking how she is. She starts to get up with difficulty and furiously orders everyone to kill the protagonist. The sect members draw their weapons and run towards him, but a huge pink explosion appears in their path and instantly sends them flying through the air. They can't even touch a single hair of the protagonist. He mentions that Zhao said she was severely injured, but that power doesn't seem like someone with a serious injury, and he asks if she can give him the opportunity to die. Zhao ignores him and reminds Shui that the strongest master of the cursed soul sect died under her sword, and she wonders why they sent her, who is not an expert in combat, to face her. So she asks where the young patriarch of the sect is. Shui, badly wounded and weak, tells her that the young patriarch will avenge them when suddenly she feels tremendous pain and collapses to the ground. The protagonist asks if she's not moving anymore and if she's just going to die like that. Then Zhao drops her sword and also falls behind him. The protagonist approaches her and asks how she is, to which she weakly responds that, luckily, she managed to break their siege with what little energy she had left. But now she has no strength, so even he could kill her. But the protagonist thinks that he doesn't believe that's luck at all, but rather something she has well under control. He tells Zhao that Shui seemed quite powerful, but he didn't expect her to be so weak. And the girl explains that her name is Shui Kingmei, and she is the holy maiden of the cursed soul sect. She is powerful in confusing people but not in fighting. While the protagonist tells her that she is badly wounded and asks her to let him help her return to the inn to rest, they see someone behind them. Suddenly, the blade of a sword appears, and Zhao pushes the protagonist to prevent him from being harmed. There we see that it's Shui who manages to pierce Zhao's body. The holy maiden says that she knew she couldn't defeat her, so she pretended to be defeated and pretended to be dead just to deliver that sword strike. And angrily, Zhao pushes the weapon away with her hand. The protagonist runs towards the girl to cover the wound with his hands and asks worriedly if she's okay. But then Shui starts to flee, telling them that it's scary to fight a trapped beast, and she'll let her live a little longer. So the young patriarch and she will be waiting for Zhao at the river crossing, and she must make sure to arrive, or else the people in the surrounding area will have to sacrifice their lives to the soul devourer. The protagonist releases Zhao and asks Shui if threatening people is all that demons know how to do. In a scene change, we see the village on the other side of the river crossing. Suddenly, someone falls onto one of the rooftops amidst a lightning explosion, and we see that it's the patriarch of the cursed soul sect, whom the holy maiden and her followers welcome. The young man spins around in the air until he finally lands on the ground, and his followers wonder why he does that. Shui congratulates him on coming out of seclusion and begins to inform him about the situation with Zhao Zuli when she realizes that the patriarch has disappeared. She sees that he is hiding among his troops, fearful that Zhao might be around. But the holy maiden explains that she gravely injured her and now she can't even lift her sword, so he shouldn't fear. He regains his composure and says that he damaged his foundations by forcing himself to advance to the Dao realm to activate the Soul Devourer. But now that he can easily kill Zhao, he can reclaim the Pearl of Confusion and repair his foundations. This worries Shui about the future of the sect. There, Zhao explains the cultivation realms, which are human, dharma, spiritual, Dao, and heaven, each of which is further divided into 10 heavens. Zhao is in the 10th heaven of the Dao realm, while the patriarch is in the 1st heaven of the Dao. Then we see a group of chained people whom the demons tell to kneel, and we see the patriarch holding a sinister scepter, saying that he will show them the power of the Soul Devourer today. So the mortals begin to lose their lives, and the patriarch says that even a mortal soul can be turned into pure power, and he wonders how Zhao's soul will turn out. In a scene change, we see the inn where the protagonist starts cursing because Zhao has stopped breathing, and if she's dead, then the mission of escorting her back to her sect is cancelled. He wonders what he should do when standing in front of her body. He says that there's only one last step, to finish her off so that the sword sect will pursue him and kill him. But then he throws the knife away and threatens the manhwa author to cut him for having such a stupid idea. The protagonist thinks that Zhao has more vitality than a strong man, and wonders how she could die after being attacked with a sword. So he is certain that he can still save her. The protagonist evaluates which first aid method to perform, whether cardiopulmonary resuscitation or artificial respiration. He decides to go with the first one, so he places his hands on her chest and tells her to wake up. He presses her chest forcefully and rapidly, causing her to spit blood. This makes the Pearl of Confusion shoot out. The protagonist catches it and recognizes it, but then he throws it away, telling it to get out of his way and not hinder him from saving people. So it bounces on the ground and rolls into a corner of the room. But then the protagonist says that's it and goes back to pick up the stone, which tempts him to use its power and unleash his desires. So the protagonist takes it, seeming to have fallen under its spell, when we then see that he only thinks about using it to make the cursed soul sect go after him and kill him. He imagines himself running away from them while taunting them with the pearl. He thinks that the possibility of dying is there, but he cries because the problem is that he became too strong since he crossed over, and without Zhao Zuli to serve as a locator, it is not possible for the cursed soul sect to find him. So she can't die, and he tells the girl that it will be her first time, so she better come back to life. He puts his lips on hers to pass air and help her breathe. The protagonist blushes and repeatedly asks her to come back to life, but it doesn't seem to work. And the protagonist says that he won't allow her to die and screams that he doesn't know what he would do without her. Then he starts crying, wondering why it had to be her and not him who received the sword strike. And while crying on the bed, he thinks it's very unfair because he has worked so hard but still can't die. Suddenly, the girl says his name, blushing, and the protagonist celebrates because she's awake. We move back in time to the back mountain of the sword sect, where we see a small figure training. There, we see that it's a young Zhao Zuli, who recounts that she started practicing at a very young age. We see her reflection in the water of a lake, where she performs quick and powerful movements, and she says she tried to be diligent in her practice, since her master told her that if she wants to reach the top, it's better to stay away from romantic affairs. And we see that she accumulated entire towers of love letters, which she burned with a swing of her sword, in front of all the suitors who were left depressed after her rejection. While she recounts that she then swore not to seek a Taoist partner for life, in order to serve the sword with a single heart. We see her meditating in the middle of the mountain as snow falls on her, and she says that she has always clung to the heart of the Tao and will give up everything as long as she can get rid of the devil and defend the Tao, even if it means her life. So, at the moment she was stabbed by Shui Qingmei, she knew it was useless to break through the sect's blockade at the river crossing and return to the sword sect alive. However, she says that the Pearl of Confusion was so evil that if it remained in the world, it would cause numerous disasters, and it must be sent to the sword sect so that the senior members can work together to destroy it. And there's only one safe way to carry it. She explains that her plan is to split the routes in two, giving the pearl to the protagonist so that he can return alone to the sword sect by another path, while she crosses the river to detonate her spirit along with all her magical weapons and take the cursed soul sect with her to death. However, the most important point of that plan is whether the protagonist is truly trustworthy. She thinks that she liked his words about good and evil, but the fact that he concealed his identity and intentions always made her feel uncomfortable. So she decided to fake her death to test the protagonist's sincerity, and asks him in her mind to tell her what he really wants. We see when the protagonist puts his hands on her chest, so she wonders if he is looking for the stone. But she sees that the protagonist is trying to save her when he starts pressing hard, making her spit blood. The protagonist stops after seeing the stone, and Zhao wonders what he will do now that he has it. But he throws it away, and the girl realizes that he really has no idea what it is. While the protagonist tells her that she can't die, she thinks that she didn't know that the only thing he cared about was her life or death. Then the protagonist approaches to sensually kiss her, and she thinks that she had only seen that in her brother's erotic collection. When the protagonist starts blowing air into her, and she screams for help. She thinks that although the method was strange, the protagonist really wanted to save her. And she sees him saying that he won't let her die and that he should have taken the blow himself. So Zhao wonders why the protagonist says that if they have only known each other for such a short time. And she remembers how he protected her fearlessly despite the dangers of the journey and the trials of the elders. So she wakes up, thinking that clearly he loves her. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. If you've reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you've been one of the few people to make it here, so comment the word hero in the comments. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss any videos. Having said that, see you in the next video.